as you can see, there have been a number of people on this reframing journey with us at the Parenting Research Centre. And I just want to acknowledge Karen Weston's in the room, and she was one of the original advocates of this when she was over at the Department of Education and Training in Victoria. So thank you, Karen. See how far we've come. We've also got other very precious partners. You can't do this on your own. This is about creating a social movement, and it's about change. So happy Child Protection Week. I'm not sure if that's appropriate either, but I'm going to say it because we are all about solutions, and you are the safe harbours. You are the people that have the solutions and provide the supports, the counselling services, housing, parenting programs, etc. So this is about doing what you do and taking that out to the world. So it's really, really important that we acknowledge the really great work that you do. And I think what Nat's given us is reminded us of the importance of story. But I think that's where we started today, and hearing from your Children's Commissioner also reminded us that our First Nations people, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, tell the very best of stories. They're the longest continuing culture in the universe, in the world, and we have so much to learn from that too. So learning from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders about story and taking that forward is something that's really, really, really important. We've got that in Australia, so let's really build on that. I guess this is where we're up to now. We've been on this journey for a number of years now, starting with this fabulous piece of research, but we're now taking it to the next level. And thank you to NAPCAN for being so engaged in this process and really featuring the news story and the news strategy during Child Protection Week. It's really exciting to have our Emerging Minds colleagues in the room here. That's a national project, but the kind of heart and soul of Emerging Minds is here in South Australia, and they're also partners on this journey too, as well as a number of jurisdictions, and we'd love to be able to connect with a lot more of you in South Australia to come on this journey as well. This story arc is incredibly important. This strategy is incredibly important. As you've heard from Nat, we now have a much more effective way of talking about parenting support in Australia. And it is a strategy that we can use in our public communications. This is about changing public thinking in Australia. It's a 10 to 15 year journey. It's not going to happen immediately, but we can start changing the story immediately. The news story is about starting with children and what they do well, and many of you in the room already start with child development rather than starting with a message around parenting. The next thing to do is to really talk about what threatens parenting, and really talking much more about context is incredibly important to prevent people going to that unproductive way of thinking about it. Just comes naturally, it's instinctive, so why would anybody need help with it? And order is everything. We need to start with children and we come back to parenting and context and skills a bit later. And the final point that Nat made was about absolutely having some solutions. So what are the skills and support parents need to raise their children? So changing the big idea is incredibly central. Parenting Research Centre has been going for about 20 years, and our strategy has always been about changing the public conversation to a more positive conversation about parenting. We know that parents are the mechanisms of change for children, so we assumed that was the story to lead on. We've always been about child outcomes, but we thought talking about parenting was the story to lead on. Then we saw the data from 7,600 Australians, and I know you like a bit of data, so hopefully I'm doing that in a framing way that doesn't put you off. But we talked to a lot of Australians through the Framing Institute's research, and what we found there was the negative impact of leading with effective parenting. This is such an important message for us all to take on, because I'm sure the Parenting Research Centre wasn't the only place to do that. Who's heard of the Raising Children Network? fantastic, a room full of people who know the Raising Children Network. That gets about between 70 and 80,000 hits a day now, so many parents are going there. And guess what? We have had to go through Raising Children Network and reframe some of our messages there. So this is about public messages to the Australian public, but it's also about how we message parents as well and how we message this message in the sector. So we have an opportunity here to make the public smarter. Okay, this is really important. We can help the public to understand our social issues so we get political support for them and we get the investments we need to really change the trajectory for children, for all children, but particularly for children experiencing disadvantage. This is really important. It's for all children, but children experiencing disadvantage too. So I just wanted to give you a couple of examples. I'm doing a bit of a reveal of how we used to say things and how we say things now. So this was one of the Parenting Research Centre's kind of parent-facing materials. We start right on the front cover with parenting matters the most. We wouldn't do that anymore because the public rightly knows that children matter most. So we would start with children now. We've got these messages that are underlined. Do not talk about the science of parenting. People will run from that. And also that message about good parenting, effective parenting. It does not work. So we're removing that from our publications. And remember those vignettes where people spoke about, well, it's just about caring, it's instinctual, it's just about love. It really means that people struggle to see that parenting happens in context and that context is important. So we've moved to the other side to always starting with children. So these are opinion pieces we've done in things like The Conversation, in educational newsletters. So it's not necessarily the public we're talking to, but public servants and people who read The Conversation. You can see we're starting with helping teens by addressing the parent confidence gap based on some research we've done. Children in out-of-home care need investment in carers. Opinion piece here, children's well-being is tied to dad's mental health. So you can really see we've shifted our communications. And that's not that hard to do, putting children first. Nat talked a lot about the importance of metaphor, and I just wanted to reiterate that metaphor is a way of people kind of retaining the message that we want to tell. It gives them something that they can hook onto, and the Australian public does understand that context matters, but that's kind of behind that very dominant message about parent being deterministic. If you're a shitty parent, if your parents were shitty, you'll be a shitty parent. Sorry, I swore, but you know, that's how the public thinks. So we really want to really bring forward this more productive way of thinking. And the lighthouses and safe harbours in that metaphor is a really beautiful visual way of seeing and trying to help people understand that context matters. Raising children's like navigating, challenges of the rough waters, but guess what? We have solutions, and that's the lighthouses and supports around us. So we really want people to understand that parenting is deeply affected by poverty, discrimination, racism, lack of housing, and inadequate services. So we're really trying to tap into that understanding so that we will get investment and support for the kind of services you run. This is just Maggie Dent. Have people heard of Maggie Dent? Yeah, beautiful parenting expert. She's been using some of the imagery. We're not sure if she's read our stuff, but I saw another tweet this morning where she starts with children thrive when their parents are supported. So I reckon she has, which is wonderful to see. As I said earlier, order is everything, starting with child development. Don't lead, as we used to, with this concept of, you know, parenting's a skill that can be learnt. That was probably a direct quote from me, unfortunately, that Nat put up earlier. He was very nice not to mention that. But I used to think talking about skills that can be learnt is the way to go. I came up with this great thing that parents aren't born, they're made. It doesn't work. So we really need to move our the ordering of how we tell the story, start with child development, and then talk about what surrounds us, shapes us, using that metaphor, using the navigating waters metaphor. You can see the story arc. Start with children. What threatens development? The other thing that I just mentioned is we've got a really nice list of advance and avoid messages in a toolkit that's freely available online. I'll give you the website in a sec. So it's on the Parenting Research Centre's website, it's on the Frameworks Institute website, NAPCAN's got the links. But it really helps you just avoid some of the common traps that will trigger unproductive ways of thinking in the public. A really common lead that Raising Children Network did, we did, other people do all the time. There was just a really, in the ABC News yesterday, there was quite a significant example of this, but we often start with parenting's a struggle. I'm sure other people in the room have done this. Parenting's the hardest thing in the world. Parenting's a struggle. We think that creates empathy, but it just reinforces the fatalism that we've got in the public. So do not start with parenting's a struggle. There was on the ABC website yesterday, they were talking about Tanya Harding, the Olympian, and she was saying in an op-ed piece she did, parenting is a challenge of Olympic proportions. Just reinforcing, if it's that hard, nothing that can be done about it. Examples of advice to parents. Again, this is a bit of a before and after, a bit of a reveal about how we used to communicate at the Parenting Research Centre. All children and families are different. Evidence-based advice helps parents make decisions that work for them in their individual family circumstance. The after is raising children is all important. You can see we're starting with child development, and parents build their children's brains every day. Our child development advice, etc., etc. So you can see we're also using the brain architecture metaphor. I know many of you are familiar with that metaphor. It has been tested in Australia, and so has the serve and return metaphor. And that's work that was done with the Centre for Community Child Health quite some time ago. So use it, use it, use it. The other thing is, don't talk about every child being different, every family being different. Of course they are, but it just reinforces, if they're so different, how can a parenting program possibly help? How could advice possibly help? Everyone's just too different. So, just moving on to, well, what can we do? And as Nat said, there are some things you can do right now. We can start by changing the conversation today. This is real live. Let's take on some of these messages now. Let's reframe now. And what can we do as a coalition to achieve durable change? And that's why it's just so great to be here in South Australia today. A lot of us around the nation are very jealous that you've got Cathy Taylor. I know when she went from Queensland to South Australia, people go, oh my God, aren't they lucky they've got Cathy Taylor? So you have a fantastic chief executive here, and we're really keen to engage with all of you around what we can do as a coalition and as a movement. So remember that communicating is framing. Secondly, share some of the research. We've got a message memo written by the Frameworks Institute on the research, and we've also got a toolkit, all available for free online. So please access those materials. Contact us. We're really happy to help and provide support and advice. Try reframing. One talking point. It really helps to practice in front of the mirror. Not really, but children thrive when parents are supported. Say it again and again till it just comes naturally and flows off the tongue. For many of you, that's where you come from anyway, but a lot of people who've been in the parenting space start with parents. We're shifting that around. A couple of examples of things we've changed in our communications, and we're getting better and better at this over the last couple of years. We've moved, as I said, from parenting requires a set of skills that are learnt on the job to good information and support helps parents navigate the smooth and rough waters of raising children. The other one is another from, and this is where we've extended into the metaphor. We believe that the most effective way to help children thrive is to work with parents. The most effective way to help children thrive is to help their parents lay the foundations for healthy development. So you can see that architectural metaphor coming into our communications there. So it is a good idea to review some of your existing communications. I spent a day with Children's Health Queensland. Everyone, they were parenting clinicians. They all brought their pamphlets in and we worked on reframing their pamphlets. It's real live stuff you can do right now. This is some work we're doing with one of the health districts in New South Wales. again, they had a great message around that kind of dynamic interaction that helps babies' brains grow around babble, you know, when your baby babbles, babble back. And that's now been extended in their communications to brains are built through the back and forth interaction, like a game of tennis. When your baby babbles, you can return their communication by talking or babbling back. And of course, getting out there online, this is some communications from Families Week. And NAPCAN, we've been working with NAPCAN, who've really been taking on these messages. But also the Every Child campaign is another really important opportunity. Simon from Uniting Care right here in South Australia is the co-chair of Every Child. And we were using the metaphor quite strongly and have been in the Every Child campaign. And the story arc and the strategy is deeply embedded in that campaign. So to find out more, please have a look on our website for the materials. We are also very grateful to have funding from both the Benevolent Society and from the Department of Social Services to undertake an implementation process now. We've got a 2-day workshop where Nat and one of his colleagues are working with about 15 different organisations to more deeply embed these messages. And they're from state, federal and NGOs and different campaigns involved. And we would love, as I said, we'd love you to be coming on board too. At Parenting Research Centre, we're very into implementation. We worry when things kind of come along and we get a little bit of information like we're getting today and then everybody goes away and gets busy again. We have some funding for implementation support. There will be a community of practice. There will be an online course around this material, but we are looking for you to come on board and partner with us on this journey. So on that note, frame on, and I'll invite you back up.